Well, that was quite the dramatic start. Hello everyone, I'm back. After taking a few weeks off, I have returned to making YouTube videos, and I felt there was no better place to start than with this. For those who watched my update video, you'll already have seen a bit of the following character, as this is the guy I was playing as during my return to Skyrim. As he worked out so well for me, I figured I'd best make him into a full-fledged build, one ideal for any intrepid adventurers who fancy returning to Tamriel's icy northern realm. Without any further delay or exposition, let's get on to the build itself. There were only 4 skills that I focused on with this character, those being smithing, heavy armour, block, and one-handed. As you might be able to tell, we're going for a very traditional and down-to-earth warrior. In the smithing skill tree, the only perk I took was still smithing, as our equipment is quite humble, but we'll get onto that shortly. There also can be potential for the arcane blacksmith perk to come in handy, but I simply didn't end up raising the skill high enough to get it. As for heavy armour, Juggernaut and Well Fitted are the key perks I invested in. Both of these raise your armour rating, helping you to sustain more blows in a fight. As the armour I wore wasn't a matching set, there was no point going above Well Fitted. On to block, where we arguably have our most important perks, Shield Wall, Deflect Arrows, and Quick Reflexes. Shield Wall is a perk you have to take, but it still is helpful, reducing the damage from blocked attacks. Deflect Arrows does exactly what it says, but do keep in mind enemies can shoot around your shield, so it by no means guarantees your safety if an archer is going full Robin Hood. Quick Reflexes on the other hand might just be the best perk in the entire game. Whenever a melee opponent attempts a power attack on you, simply raise your shield and time will flow at a fraction of the speed. Use this to sidestep the swing, shield bash your enemy, or finish them off if they're weak enough. Enemy power attacks can often be fatal, so avoiding them is paramount. On top of that, I've had a fair few times where the perk has bugged out, I've avoided a blow while time was slowed, and it never sped back up again, allowing me to freely dispatch all surrounding enemies without any resistance. Finally, we have the one-handed perks, these being Armsman, Fighting Stance, Bladesman, Savage Strike, and Critical Charge. Armsman is both the simplest and most important perk of the bunch, increasing one-hand damage by 20% per rank. Bladesman allows you to deal critical damage with swords, but it's a random chance for it to happen, so is more an occasional help than a real game changer. Savage Strike and Critical Charge will make your power attacks more deadly, while Fighting Stance reduces the stamina they consume. The skills section has likely clued you into the type of equipment we've got going, but let's break it down nonetheless. First up is our weapon, a simple steel sword. This standard weapon can be found after your very first level up, and should be familiar to anyone who's played Skyrim before. For our chest piece, we have banded iron armour. This is honestly one of the weakest pieces of armour to go for, but it's easy to obtain at the start of the game, and this isn't intended as a powerhouse build. To match the chest plate, we also have a banded iron shield. In the early levels, this shield is quite the desirable bit of kit, and should help push back the gnashing teeth of the wolves. For boots, standard iron. A humble, heavy armour for a man simply doing what he must to survive. Likewise, the gauntlets will be iron, matching nicely with the rest of the outfit. The helmet is the only piece above this quality, being a rounded steel helmet. The head's the most important body part, so may as well give it the best protection. As I'm sure you can tell, this armour has been chosen more for aesthetics and roleplaying than it has for any amazing bonuses it will grant. I created this character as a simple reintroduction to the game, and a full suit of ebony or dragonbone armour didn't fit with that tone. Simple iron and steel help to keep the game challenging, and forces the player to really take their time, weighing up their fights and accepting more humble quests at the start. The only real practical advantage to speak of is that you'll likely find a fair few enchanter pieces of this gear lying around in the early levels, so make sure to pick it up. In particular, keep an eye out for anything that increases one-handed damage, as it will be much needed. Now to move on to the required miscellaneous details, such as levelling up, standing stones, and powers. The standing stone I used with this build was the Warrior Stone. All of your skills fall under this stone, so it simply means you level up the important stuff 20% faster. Speaking of levelling up, Magicka can be ignored entirely as you're not a mage. Health is the most important stat, and I put around 80% of my levels into it. The remaining 20% go into stamina, allowing you to carry more, sprint for longer, and even squeeze in an extra power attack here and there. As for the powers to use, I kept this very simple. I didn't concern myself with becoming the Dragonborn so I could shoot fire from my mouth. Instead, I went down a more humble path, only rarely relying on the power that all Imperials start with, Voice of the Emperor. As an Imperial, once per day you can calm all people around you for 60 seconds. Get yourself too deep into a fight you can't win, speak the word of the Emperor, and bring yourself a brief respite. I tried not to rely on this ability, instead viewing it more as a panic button, only to be used if there was no other way out. When I played this character, I set myself the goal of becoming Thane of all the realms of Skyrim. For this reason, I would class the main allegiance of the character not to be with any of the traditional factions you would think of, but instead to the Jarls. He will seek out the leader of each region and help them however he can, eventually becoming Thane and being able to purchase land within the Hold. Along with purchasing land, you will also be granted a housecarl, an individual sworn to your service. These will serve as your followers, protecting you in battle and working as stewards for any land you purchase. If you do want to become Thane in every single hold, then it will require you to get involved in the Civil War. When it came to choosing sides, I found myself able to justify joining either side with the character. Before writing up the backstory, I was leaning more towards the side of the Imperial Legion. After though, things flipped, and the Stormcloak seemed the more appropriate choice. As it stands though, either can be chosen for numerous different reasons, so I'll leave it up to you. When it comes to playing this character, there are two areas to talk about. The first being combat, and the second their goals. For combat we keep things very simple. A heavily armoured warrior with sword and shield results in a straightforward character to play. Close the distance with your enemy, using the shield to protect you from any arrows coming your way. Once within striking range, try and find the right tempo between shield bashing to stagger your opponent, and slashing with your sword in order to damage them. Use terrain to try and avoid facing more than one enemy at a time, and don't be afraid to fall back and let your follower do the brunt of the work. There are two items I would recommend you hotkey, these being healing potions and vegetable soup. Healing potions need no explanation, but vegetable soup may well do. This food item can be crafted at a cooking station with cabbage, potato, leek and tomato. When consumed, it grants you 1 point of health and stamina per second for the next 12 minutes. Both power attacks and shield bashes only require a single point of stamina to work, so vegetable soup allows you to permanently stagger lock enemies, making it by far the greatest consumable Skyrim has to offer. As for the goals of this character, I wanted to indulge myself within the exploration aspects of the game while keeping things role-playing friendly. To this extent, I put a focus on the Half-Fire DLC, building up houses in Skyrim and taking my time to expand and decorate them through the hard work of mining ore, travelling to villages to purchase glass and straw, and generally just acting as if I was a medieval homeowner. I'd follow the paths, keeping an eye out for wolves or bandits on the road, and do my best to be a respectable member of Skyrim society. As for why I chose this approach with the character, that's best explained in the backstory. The Fallen Lord is an Imperial who was granted a place in the higher echelons of society from birth. His father was an Imperial general who had been greatly rewarded for his services before his untimely death just a few years after his son's birth. The child's mother was a shrewd individual who not only managed the estates her husband left behind, but expanded her political influence through whatever means she could. As for her son, he cared not what his mother was doing. For the young lord, all that mattered was that his childhood remained as easy as it ever was. He had been pampered by his mother, and the servants always treated him with respect. His birth had taken place a year after the White Gold Concordant, meaning that the imperial city in which he was raised was one of peace. His young life knew no struggles, and he made it to adolescence with a firm belief that all of his years would be as effortless. A comfortable existence left him unprepared for the events that unfolded during his late teens. His mother's ambitious nature had apparently driven her down some dark paths, resulting in her imprisonment and execution by the Imperial Guard. She had been accused of planning an assassination against a member of the Elder Council, and it was only when the sentence was carried out that the young Imperial realised things were amiss. He had never been close to his mother, or anyone for that matter, and had pleasantly enjoyed the luxuries that the wealthy could indulge in. With the news of his mother's death came too the realisation that all his worldly possessions would be taken from him. He had no claim to them, not as the son of a traitor. His servants, no longer bound to him, gladly departed in search of employment elsewhere. No friends were there to come to his aid. He was too old to be taken in by an orphanage, and he had no skills upon which to earn a living. In the end, only one choice presented itself: take to the streets and beg. The kindness of strangers would dictate if he ate every night. Goose feather beds and sunlight souffle were replaced with cold stone floors and chunks of hardened bread. Luxury was forever gone, and now he would have to scrounge for his survival. Although his new life was far worse in almost every way, it did force him to pay attention to the world around him for the first time. Few would give a beggar a coin out of charity, but plenty were there who would pay for shreds of information. The young man learned to listen out whenever the nobles were speaking, and would gladly pass on the knowledge to anyone who looked as if they would pay. It was while eavesdropping in such a way that he overheard two imperial wizards discussing the fate of his late mother. It seemed the pair were drunk from vast quantities of alto wine, and were relishing in her death, boasting to one another that they held the most integral parts in her downfall. The level of intoxication made the conversation less than well structured, but it did lead to some major revelations. If what the mages said was true, then his mother may have potentially been framed by these men, or at the very least betrayed by them. Mentions of his father also led him to speculate on how his death had taken place, a matter which he had never thought to question in the past. The grim beast of paranoia found a warm place to rest within the youth's mind, spreading fear as to his own fate. The thought of starving on the streets had been enough to break his spirits, but this took things a step further. With terror growing, he fled the Imperial City, in which he had so far spent his entire life. An assassin's blade, a poisoned loaf, who knew what would happen to him if he stayed? He ventured north through Cyrodiil, never feeling safe. He attempted to start up a new life in Bruma, but found his nights restless, still fearing for his own safety. After a full year of travel, he finds himself in Skyrim. As he enters the harsh northern realm, his fears reduce somewhat, but habit pushes him further still, eventually ending up in the small mining settlement of Darkwater Crossing. With nothing but the rags on his back, he begs a local group of soldiers for food, and they take pity on him. As he starts to feast on the bowl of stew he has been gifted, a group of Imperial Legion warriors rush the small camp, surrounding them. Panic takes a hold and the beggar attempts to flee, but is promptly knocked out. When he awakes, it is to a sight I'm sure we're all familiar with. After the events of Helghan, the fallen lord begins to re-evaluate his life. For too long now has he fled, crying for what he's lost and wishing things were better. Here in the chaos of Skyrim, nobody cared about his past, and he could start a new life. He would have to work hard this time around. A comfortable life was not waiting for him, and he would have to earn a position of power that had originally been his birthright. The journey ahead would be a long and challenging one, but that's how the best journeys always are. And there we have it. My return to YouTube is official, and I figured returning with a Skyrim build would be rather fitting. As I mentioned in the channel update, content will be coming out at a slower rate because making these videos to the quality I want really does take a long time. If you did enjoy this, please don't hesitate to leave a like so I know, and subscribe to see more videos in the future. As always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.